I started flying in 1967 with American Airlines, and I was 20 years old, and I flew until 2002, so well over 30 years. I was based in, I think, 7 different bases, and I was flying with American, of course, when we had heavy smoke on the planes all the way through the smoking ban, finally.
Well, could you describe for us some of your experiences that you had with secondhand smoke as a flight attendant?
Oh, it was, when I first started flying in '67, we didn't even have smoking sections on airplanes. It was everywhere. And it was so dense that if you were sitting on an aft jump seat and the airplane was climbing out and you'd see that no smoking sign go off, the cloud in the smoke, the smoke in the cabin would make this blue haze you could barely see from the back to the front. It was that thick.
Were there kids on the plane?
Oh, sure. People didn't think about it back then because back then we were all told that secondhand smoke didn't hurt you.
How about your colleagues, some of the other flight attendants? Did they suffer problems?
I think we all did, but we were told it was other causes. A lot of frequent colds, sinus problems, various respiratory things. I think we're simply people who were exposed to something probably more heavily than any other group there was. Back in a time when we weren't given the correct information. And we ended up very damaged. So I guess whether we want to give testimony or not, we are, because we were put in this position. As Patty likes to say, we were the canaries in the coal mines. We were up there in this flying tube with incredibly dense quantities of an extremely bad toxin.
I started flying in the summer of 1966 when I was 1 week into my 20th birthday, and I quit flying 2.5 years ago. So I flew for 37.5 years.
And what airlines?
For American Airlines.
You know, in any of those flights, did you ever get exposed to secondhand smoke?
I got exposed to secondhand smoke on an immense level, even in training. Almost everybody in training for stewardess college, as we called it back then. 700 people in stewardess school. Almost all of them smoked. And we had smoking in every limousine. We had smoking in every hotel room because we had to share our hotel rooms with another stewardess. We had smoking in every operations, every terminal, every bathroom. And on the airplane, the smoke was so bad, you could not see from the front of the airplane to the back of the airplane because the passengers smoked in every seat, every aisle, on every jump seat, in every buffet on the airplane, in the cockpit. I have had severe sinus problems and coughing problems since about 1969. It took about 2.5 years, 3 years to get chronic bronchitis, chronic laryngitis. I can go into anaphylactic shock from tobacco smoke. I've had to have the EpiPen several times put in me. I can go into asthma attacks, severe asthma attacks. I never quit coughing. I cough every day of my life, and I have severe sinus problems.
Did your hair smell bad? Your clothes smell bad after working on a long flight?
Actually, when I started flying, there were no carts on the airplane where you could run your meals up and down the aisle. We had to hand run every single meal to every passenger. So I found out quickly in my career I was better in the kitchen on the airplane, setting everything up. I was very, very, very organized, very clean. So I would be the one most of the time standing in the kitchen, setting all the trays up and all the meals up and all the beverages up for the other stewardesses, then flight attendants. And since I was standing in the kitchen all the time, in the buffet, I stood right underneath a return air vent that was about this big. It was just a few inches above my head, and that was like a vacuum cleaner. You could put towels up there and it would suck them up and keep them. It brought all the smoky air past my face and into that air vent, and it turned black all the time, the air vent was. And within 20 minutes on the airplane, I could wipe because I did not wear makeup, my skin burned so bad I could wipe my skin off and it looked like a coffee stain every 20 minutes. And I started getting violently sick the first maybe 8 to 10 months into my flying career, with violent headaches, with vomiting and diarrhea all the time.
And what did you do about this?
I really did not know what was going on. I suspected it could have been the tobacco smoke, but not one human being on the face of the earth said that it was tobacco smoke. But early on my career, very early, the other stewardesses were telling me that they were told by their doctors that they had the lungs of smokers and they never smoked. That was a stunning, stunning declaration from flight attendant after flight attendant after flight attendant. You could even see a non-smoking flight attendant on the airplane walk from one cabin to the other and cough, and literally cough smoke out of their lungs. And they were non-smokers. So the smoke was everywhere.
Well, I started flying in 1954, and I flew for Pan American World Airways for 34 years, and I flew for United for about 13 years until retirement. When I first started flying, again, we were just inundated with smoke from the front of the airplane, including the cockpit, because in those days, all the pilots smoked, and to the back of the airplane. So you couldn't get out of it. I was working all over the airplane, and I couldn't get out of it. So you were just inhaling tons and tons of cigarette smoke the whole flight for the whole time. I know that not only me, but my coworkers as well, we were constantly coughing. We would stand in the galley and cough and cough and cough. When I first started, most of them were smokers, and I thought that's their smoking cough. But it's turned out that for many of us, I never smoked. So it was more than that for me. I complained to the medical department, and I had been off flight for a week or 10 days. We had to go in and get a medical clearance before we could go back on flight. And, I complained to the doctor who I was talking to. And I learned later, he put in the record that he thought I was just making it up, that there was nothing to it. And even at that time, I'd been under the care of a pulmonologist for about 7 or 8 years.
By the time I came along in 1985, smoking was still on the airplanes. With all the work, with all the petitions, with all the complaints, and this isn't healthy and we don't like this, it still hadn't changed. And I did not grow up in a smoking family. I didn't have any smoking friends. So my first real exposure to cigarette smoke in a contained atmosphere was at work. And when I went on my first trip, it's called a work trip. You're a trainee and you have your little badge on, it says trainee. And we took off and that no smoking sign went off, and people were sitting on the edge of their seat waiting to light their cigarette. And I thought, oh, this is not good. This is not good. This is not what I expected. And it was just a cloud of smoke, and just poof, instantly. And immediately it became hard to breathe, and I just thought, oh, this is my work environment. This is what I've signed up to do, and I didn't realize it was going to be this way. I was working in a flying ashtray, and I wasn't happy.
Did you complain to management about those working conditions?
I did, but I waited a certain amount of time, when you are a new hire flight attendant and you're on probation, you cannot say anything out of the ordinary, because it's very easy to get fired for crossing your eyes the wrong way. So what I did at first is would talk to my coworkers, and I'd say, you know, this is really awful back here. It's so hard to breathe back here, and is it always this smoky? And I trusted my coworkers, and I felt more comfortable with fellow flight attendants. And I kept hearing over and over, well, there's a flight attendant that's been trying to get smoking off the airplanes, and if you're really serious about this, you need to talk to her. Her name's Patty Young. And one person said, she's been trying to get smoking off the airplanes for 20 years. This is who you need to talk to. So put a note in her box, and 22 years ago, put a note in her box, said, I'm a new hire flight attendant, and somebody said I needed to contact you, and we've been friends ever since. And next thing I knew, she had me signing petitions. I had petitions on the airplane. I had passengers signing these petitions saying how much we didn't like the smoke and we wanted it to be smoke-free. And
1991, Stanley and Susan Rosenblatt, they're a husband and wife team, lawyer team in Miami, Florida, with 9 children, took our lawsuit after I had gone all over the country on and off for 20 years, asking famous lawyers to take our case. I had even gone to Public Citizen, Ralph Nader's Public Citizen, in the summer of 1976 to ask them to take our case. They couldn't do it, and Stanley and Susan Rosenblatt took our case. I would come home at midnight after flying a trip, and I would fax some information to Stanley and Susan Rosenblatt at midnight, and they would be in their offices working on our lawsuit at midnight or later their time in Florida. I'm in Dallas. And they would fax me right back because they were working on our lawsuit for all those years between 1991 and 1997 until we got to court. They believed in our case so much that they were doing everything possibly to win for us our just due, because they believed in what we had gone through, and they believed in what we were trying to do to take smoking off the airplane, and the fact that we were dying in our jobs because of what had happened to us because of the tobacco smoke in our work environment. And we finally got to court in, like I said, in 1997. We were in court for 4 months. We sat in that courtroom the courtroom was divided down the center. There were about 60 tobacco lawyers on one side of the courtroom, and there were our 2 lawyers on our side and a handful of flight attendants. It was amazing. And we settled for a $300 million research foundation to prevent, treat, and cure the diseases caused by tobacco smoke. And because of Stanley and Susan Rosenblatt, that's the reason this foundation is here. And we're going to change the world with this foundation because they have laser eyes, because they got to question the tobacco company head honchos. Because of our lawsuit, they know where these people are coming from, and they know how to fight them through this foundation. They know that we're going to change the world and how to change the world because of our foundation. We've done a lot already, but I am so grateful for their guidance, their tenacity, their vision, and I'm just grateful for them and everything they do and how they do it. I can't even imagine not having them with us in this foundation. And I am very grateful to be a part of this. I'm just a street fighter. That's all I've ever been. Just a street fighter. And that's all I really ever want to be. So, and I'm thankful to them, and I'm thankful to the other people on the foundation. Susan Rosenblatt really, really, really carried this through. To help us, because there's not a coincidence there when American Airlines go smoke-free the day our lawsuit started. That's not a coincidence. After working on the fight from 66 to 97, that's, 31 years later, and they go smoke-free. So I'm profoundly, I will be my whole life grateful to what they've done. And it came at a great price. I mean, they just worked and worked and worked and worked and worked.
Well, when I was contacted by the attorneys, Susan and Stanley Rosenblatt, I thought that this was a very good opportunity to really promote good health practices by Americans. And I didn't do this lightly because, I was not accustomed to testifying in litigation. It's obviously time-consuming and all. But I thought the health of the public was so important, and that I had a commitment to public health as a former Surgeon General to really engage in this litigation. And I think subsequently it proved to be true that this provided an opportunity, particularly the way the media cover trials, to get the truth out. And the truth in relationship to cigarette smoking is very eloquent. So it was an opportunity, and I did it as a matter of social conscience as a citizen. I had nothing personal to gain from this, and I refused to benefit personally from it. So I accepted no fees for testifying, and I don't mean that in a self-righteous fashion, but I felt that I had, as a former Surgeon General, a commitment to the public's health, and that I had, in a sense, an obligation to testify. Well, I think it is important that this Flight Attendants Medical Research Institute, and this is their latest annual report, has been in existence for the past 5 years and has provided an opportunity through the income from the $300 million which the industry provided as a settlement, to use those resources, that income, to gain further knowledge about the effects of tobacco use, and particularly secondhand smoke. I would say one other thing about the impact of our knowledge on secondhand smoke. As we gained more and more information about the harmful effects of secondhand smoke, that had an enormous public health significance, because then no longer was it a matter of smokers' rights, but it was a matter of environmental health and the rights of people to breathe clean air. So that one then had allies beyond the public health community. Every citizen has a stake in breathing clean air. So that was another very major marker. And the resources now going into further research just augment the impact of what the flight attendants were able to highlight by bringing this suit.